Good morning. I'm just having my coffee here while I check out these hides that I hung up last night to dry. In the last video, we took these fully tanned hides. They're completely penetrated and tanned with the oak bark, and I put them into a fat liquor, which is an oil and water emulsion. So if you pour a bunch of oil into water, it just floats to the top, right? But certain substances can form a bridge between the water and the oil, and those are called emulsifiers. Poured the oil and water and egg yolk into a blender, poured that in the water, and then we have a solution of oil and water mixed together. So that allows that solution to go into the hide fiber and deposit oil all evenly throughout the skin. So I just took them out of there, hung them up here to dry overnight, and we're going to finish drying them today and then put them back, because you can imagine that once the skin is dry, then all that liquid going in there with carrying that oil is really going to get in there and fully penetrate and evenly coat the fibers inside of the hide. These kind of stuck together last night. We're going to peel those apart, maybe hang them up with clothespins. It's not sunny here. I don't actually want them in the sun, but there's a lot of air circulation moving down this hill right here, so they're going to dry pretty fast. All right, so if we find a part of this hide that's mostly dry, we can see that just stretching it a little bit will break it real soft and make it nice and leather-like. Okay, so see you in a few hours. So this will be video number 10, if you can believe that, in this series. If by now you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of work to tan, yeah, it is actually a lot of work. And I always underestimate how much it is. But doing this series has made me realize all the time I put in that I totally forget about. I mean, the series itself is hours long, and I don't shoot everything, and I've thrown away the vast majority of the footage. So, you know, obviously it takes me longer because I'm talking, you know, like this, standing around talking about stuff instead of just doing it. I have all kinds of inefficiencies. I have to go look for things. You know, I don't have a tannery set up. So there's ways that you can streamline this process and add mechanization. But bottom line is, yeah, it's a lot of work. Okay, I don't want to, you know, bend these too much until they're damp and lubricated, and just going to put these right back in here. I'm not going to, again, bend them around a lot. I just want to splash some liquor up on here and let them start to soften up a bit. And now that this hide fiber is totally dried out, it's really going to absorb this oily emulsion deep into the hide fiber structure. I'd prefer that this liquor was warm, but I didn't plan ahead. I don't feel like taking the time to heat it up on like the stove or something. And I'm just gonna leave them in here for 20 or 30 minutes, probably come by and kind of push on them like this a little bit, but I'm not gonna start working them. I'm not going to start stretching them or anything until they've been in here for a little bit, because it's going to get a lot easier. There's no need for me to rush that process. Okay, so the problem here is that I haven't stretched any of these hides yet. I put them in yesterday evening. I just kind of put them in here real quick and left them. The hides aren't even completely soaked up, so I have to go over here and stretch them, because no matter how long I leave them in here, they basically aren't going to soak up all the way without a little bit of help. And all it requires is just this little bit of stretching. So any stiff edges and stuff like that, I want to kind of go over. So I can do this by hand this way, just like I'm doing, and that's totally fine. But I'm going to use a tool because, you know, I know it's going to be faster and easier to use this tool. So let's get that together. Okay, this is the what I call a stationary stake. I'm pretty sure I made that name up for the buckskin book that I wrote in the 90s. So I want to clean this off to make sure there's not a bunch of splattered dirt on here, like rain, splatter, mud, which I'm quite sure there is. And I'm going to actually get a brush and scrub this to make sure it's good and clean. Yeah, so this is a super simple design, ridiculously simple, effective enough. Is it great? No, it's not great at all. It's, you know, this is loosened up a lot, but I've been using this particular one with a few repairs. You can see this 2x4 here is totally rotten for like decades. This thing's been around for decades. It's about time it'd be so easy to build something a little bit better, but it's just one of those things where it's like, it always works well enough that I don't bother to fix it. But I think it's about time to build a new one. My ideal blade for this is actually slightly different, a little bit wider. That's stainless steel. It doesn't have to be high quality like tool steel or anything like that. It's not very sharp. You can also just put bury a post in the ground and sharpen the wooden edge, but it won't stay sharp for very long. This is just an old tarp that I use for things like chopping bark and carving and other craft work. I'm doing very specific things here. So I'm grabbing a handful of hide, and I want to get all the edges because the edges tend to curl in and harden a lot as the hide dries. So then I'm putting my hand over here and pulling this because I want this to come over at a sharp angle. That's really how it works to sort of break open the hide fiber. But since I'm applying a little pressure here, I have to pull harder on this than I would if I just, see, I can't just do that. I can grab this and go like that, and that's fine, but then I can't get the edge. So I'm just gonna instead work around the entire edge of the hide, going from, you know, inside the hide to the edge with this technique of putting my hand here. That way, with one pull, I can get all the way to stretching out the edge. This could also be probably done in an agitator, a tumbler, a washing machine, by stomping on the hides with your bare feet. Take off my shoes and wash my dirty feet and get in there. Very common old technique for tanning that's still practiced in the rooftop tanneries of Morocco, which look up on YouTube because they're amazing. They still do a lot of very traditional vegetable tanning in these round, really old round pits. I mean, these tanneries are ancient. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. I just want to work around the entire edge, and I'll go, you know, kind of check it and work it a little. You can also, if the edges aren't quite coming around, which these are, you can go over the edges this way too. And any kind of back and forth type of stretching you do is good. So now that I've done the edges, I'm going to go across the middle of the hide like this, systematically from neck to tail, just to make sure I'm getting everything well opened out. And remember, all the liquid that's going into the fiber structure now is carrying these oils that we suspended in the water. So the other thing that could help is just taking this and stretching it. So I just went across it, you know, side to side, and now I can grab it more like a neck to tail direction and just put a little stretch on that. And of course, you could also pull it across that way, and you can stretch large portions of the hide by setting it on the stake, grabbing both ends, and just leaning like that. Just as an easy way to put a stretch on it and use your body weight. Make sure that it really gets soaked up, and we'll go to the next one. So I hope you can see how this edge is kind of stiff, and you know, it's different colors, like this is dark and light. The parts that aren't soaked up are still dark, and look when I pull on it. And you see those white areas that are forming, or the light colored areas? Those are areas that were dry and not all the way soaked up. We'll look at here, watch this spot right here. See that? And I'll see you guys when I'm done with this step, and the hides have soaked for a little while after I do this. So this is the last one. You can see this one really shrunk up a lot, but watch this. Big difference. And if I don't do this or something, I have to do some kind of work, these will never soak up. They need help. You know, really slosh these around. I could stretch them more, but I don't really think it's necessary. I think more of like this kneading action for maybe like 5 minutes of total time. I just pull these numbers out of nowhere. Once this hide fiber is soaked up completely, it's not really going to benefit, I don't think, from sitting in there for a long time. Like if I let this sit overnight, once these, you know, I'm confident that everything's opened back up and soaked up, I don't think there's going to be any benefit to that. Once it's fully saturated, I think we're good. Now I might give it, you know, 15 or 20 minutes or a half hour, but more or less I'm not worried about that. It's more these cycles of drying the oil in and then, you know, re-soaking it or something along those lines. Okay, these are feeling really good now. Just luxuriously lubricated. So just to take a break and, you know, make sure, I'm gonna give these a few, maybe 20 minutes or so while I figure out what to do with them next. So it's been kind of a long day and I'm hungry and I don't feel like finishing this project tonight or working on it. So I'm just gonna leave these overnight. I wanna dry these stretched out and not let them shrivel up again. Still kind of figuring out what technique I wanna use, but I'll be thinking about that tonight and we'll get back on this in the morning. Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. Instead of demonstrating 4 different methods, I'm gonna finish 2 of these hides out and I'm gonna tack 2 of them to the wall to dry. Okay, it's 12:30 already. It's a nice warm day. I can manage this by moving it in and out of drier and less dry and warmer and less warm areas in and out of the sun. I think I could probably do it today even still. Okay, let's assume I can finish this today. If I don't, at a certain point when it's not too dry, I can still put it away, and I may just put it away overnight or even for a couple days in the refrigerator, maybe until these are ready or something like that. But let's get a start on this. So the first thing I want to do is scud this out to get some of the moisture out of here. Now we're not going to have to do that with these other hides because they're going to be dried completely, and then a controlled certain amount of moisture is going to be put back into them without making any part of the skin soggy. This is going to be a quick scraping because there's really nothing left on the flesh side hardly to take off. I'm just going to zip over this surface to push out most of the moisture. You're going to see a lot of moisture coming out of here. And so that shouldn't take very long. And I'm not trying to do a super good job of getting the moisture out because that would also take me a long time. And I'd rather let the atmosphere take care of that. You get the picture. I will see you on the other end of this job. So now it really feels like a wet piece of leather more than a soggy hide. I just want to wash this wall off so that, you know, there could be mold, wood fiber, I don't know what. See, watch how dirty this water is. Black, it's black, right? I don't want that. Makes me not even want to use this wall. In fact, I'm gonna scrub it twice. These are the inefficiencies of the home tanner, right? If I had a tannery, I'd have like, I don't know, a bunch of sheets of clean plywood that I use regularly, or a clean wall, or some racks with like special fasteners for clipping onto the hides. That'll do. I'm not going to try to make this super flat. It's not going to want to be flat. The edges are going to be, you know, have this kind of folds and wrinkles. Again, I'll make some adjustments as I go along. What I'm trying to do is dry the hide with all the fiber pretty much open. Once I damp it back and start to work on it, it'll kind of readjust to its natural shape regardless of how I tack it out. Now I don't want it radically, you know, different than its natural kind of tensions and shape would dictate, but I'm not overly worried about it. It's mostly so that the hide doesn't just radically shrink inward. It's more likely to turn out a natural shape if it's not completely wrinkled up when it's worked on. If the skin is flat, I can lay it out to damp it back a lot easier. And again, I'm avoiding talking about that process because we're gonna just, you know, you'll see it when I do it. But it's basically done with wet towels. So if I'm trying to like stack this or roll it with wet towels, it's gonna be hard if it's all shrunken up. But as you can see, there's a lot of, you know, wave to this edge here. And that's just gonna, it's just gonna be that way. I'm not putting a lot of stretch on it, just a little bit. This could also be strung up in a frame. Kind of a lot of work. Not my favorite thing to do, putting hides in frames. I'm not a big fan of it. It's super useful, but I just don't like doing it. All right, we're back at the clothesline here. Before I tack up that other hide, I just want to get these airing out a little bit faster here so they dry quickly. Now, one problem with this hide right here is that I think it's going to get in the sun later. This is sort of the north side of the building, but I'm pretty sure this is going to catch some sun. But all I have to do is lean something up here to shade it. If you're going to finish out a piece of leather, the rule of thumb is you want it to dry slow. It will shrink less, dry more evenly, curl up less, all that stuff. So I decided that it doesn't make any sense at all for me to soften these two hides today and then do the other hides on a different day. It's just silly. So what I don't want though is I don't want any part of these hides to dry so much that it's completely dry. So I'm just going to let this sit until the edges are starting to approach a little bit drier, and then I'll fold these up and probably put them in a plastic bag in the fridge. Is kind of the easiest, safest thing to do with them. Until it's time to finish all the hides, we'll take those other hides that are tacked out, damp them back, and finish them all in one day. Well, I'm afraid I might have let these go too far. I had to go take a nap for a while and just got up. So it feels like these thinner areas that are the most dry parts of the hide are still not quite completely dry. When I roll these up and put them away in like a plastic bag, the moisture that's in here is going to redistribute and re-dampen any kind of partially dry areas. They actually feel like they're at a pretty good place to break, and I'm sorely tempted to start, but it just doesn't make sense for me to work these two hides now and then the other ones later. It's just way more efficient to do them all at once. Put these away and then check on the other hides. Fold the drier edges inward. Make sure all the outside edges are tucked inward. By tomorrow, the moisture in here will be well distributed. This is working out actually, I think, pretty good. All right, these two hides are dry. It's been days. I'm gonna take this one down and we're gonna damp these back, which means we're gonna get them to a semi-consistent level of moisture throughout. It just makes them, you know, dry at a more even rate. There's just a lot more moisture in the skin if they've been soaked. And this pulled off the wall a couple of times. You know, it shrunk and pulled the, actually ripped the skin. If you use a lot more nails, it evens out the pressure, and it may not do that. But I also didn't drive these in very far, so they kind of would like bend to the side and stuff. So it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to dry it pretty flat and with like a more open fiber structure rather than letting it kind of just shrink up. These are the hides that I took out of the solution. I scraped over them once on the beam, on the flesh side. I hung them up, I let them partly dry. The edges were a little on the dry side. And then I folded them with the edges inward and put them in the fridge. And then yesterday I was like, I don't know when I'm gonna get to this, and I don't want to risk them like starting to mold in the fridge. So I threw them in the freezer. So they're frozen right now, and I'm just gonna leave these out overnight to soften tomorrow. And what I have here is some towels. I washed a load of towels today. Most of these are towels that I use just for projects like tanning hides and stuff. If you're gonna do a lot of hide tanning, start looking for old funky towels. My washing machine is from the 1940s. It doesn't even have a spin cycle. I just drip the towels all day, and they're like wet, but not sopping wet, not dripping. There are other ways to do this, but this is how I usually do it. It works really well. You want a layer of towels between all the layers of hide. If I were to keep adding more hides, I would add more towels. Oh wait, I want to roll these the other way because I don't want to push the grain in and compress it. I'm going to do that anyway later, but I just think it's safer for the grain to roll it this way for some reason. I guess that's just intuition or something. Okay, so I put the grain side down, so I'm rolling it so that the hair side or grain side is being stretched versus being compressed and crunched down. And if you're not sure which way you're going to finish your hides, with smooth grain or crinkly grain, which you'll understand better once we get there, then you definitely want to do it this way versus the other way. Okay, that's it. And usually I'd put this in a plastic bag or roll it in a sheet of plastic or something like that. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I kind of want to just take it and bury it in some dry leaves overnight. Just want to make sure that, you know, the wet towels are everywhere around the hide. And it doesn't mean that they have to be like in direct contact with the hide. It's as much about the atmospheric moisture, because, you know, now they're in like 100% or more, if that's possible, air moisture level, and so they're just going to get damp because the leather essentially attracts moisture pretty easily. Now, I wouldn't want to leave this much longer than overnight, but I think this will be adequate for tonight, and if it's not, we'll do something else tomorrow. Let's check on our cattle skin layer here. It's nice and strong. It's growing like a kind of like a mother of vinegar bacterial thing here. I'm sure that's a healthy thing. I think we're good for now. The hides that were already ready in that plastic bag, I'll just put back. The hides that we damped back, we're going to pull those out, check them, and if they're ready, we'll fold them up and we'll add them to the ones in this plastic bag, so they'll be just ready to go tomorrow. Dig up our damped back hides. Hopefully they're damped back adequately. Okay, so what we have is a hide that feels damp, and you can see when I stretch it, it will stretch out. It's kind of, you know, rubbery, and grain can stretch easily enough, and these feel pretty good. This is about, you know, what I want to start breaking these and softening them. Maybe just a little dry right here. We can splash a little water on that. I'm just gonna wet my hand just in some of these thick areas. I could just add a little. And again, this water I'm adding will kind of creep around and even out through the hide. That's how this works. And that's how we want it to work. So that looks good. Pull this one out. Feels very similar, kind of damp. You can see I can stretch this and start to break it and soften it. I'm going to do the same thing because it's just kind of thick here in the neck. And this isn't going to cause any real problems. It's not going to cause it to dry a lot slower or anything like that. I'm just going to add just a little more moisture. Lay these one atop the other, and we're going to put these away. Thin edges inward, really all the edges inward. And we can just make this into a tidy little package. So exciting! We're going to finish this. Too bad it's not going to be today, but that's okay.